My name is Squidward, and I hate my life.
Race you to the
I'm back. Alright, yeah, yes. Alright. I'm back from vacation, so you know what that means. Back to watching Game Theory. Yay! I'm tired. But let's do this.
race you to the ball pit. Hey, that's no fair. I haven't got my shoes off yet. Made it. Ozzy. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory, and the start to what will undoubtedly be a very FNAF-y new year, because everyone else in the games industry is concentrated on new consoles with all of the teraflops, none of the actual games. Five Nights at Freddy's is over here in the corner doing its own thing and releasing, you know, exciting and interesting stuff. Last year's Help Wanted was a fantastic addition to the series, which keeps updating itself with new and exciting lore all the time. There's that new 80s inspired game coming out later this year. The AR game is something I should probably talk about at some point, since apparently that also has lore implications. And most interestingly of all, we have ourselves the rollout of a new book series, Fazbear Frights. The first one released after Christmas, and before the end of this year, there'll be a total of, let me check my notes, holy mother of Ennard, five
12.
installments in a new book series in a year? Looks like Scott's gone back to his roots of just mass releasing stuff. It's like he saw the Netflix model of binge watching a show and was like, I want that, but for video games and apparently books. Jeez, if only mass drop lore reveals for us to binge understand, we'd all be happier for it. Anyway, the reason I call these books out is that, first off, they're just really good. You ever read the Goosebumps books? I definitely did. Every single one. Night of the Living Dummy and Ghost Next Door every day, fam. Well, Fazbear Frights is just a modern version of those, with each book containing 3 short horror stories all set within the FNAF universe. And
Don't they still make Goosebumps books? Or am I just crazy? I know that they made really bad movies. I don't know. The first one was okay. Like, it wasn't. The second one I didn't really like at all.
And through them being a part of the franchise, they weren't afraid to get super bleak. Today's episode is going to go into detail for the first 3, so if you want to read them blind, consider this your spoiler warning. Anyway, to give you a sense of tone, one story ends with a girl finding her severed body parts hidden away in plastic bags, only to then realize that she herself has been, piece by piece, replaced with a robotic body. In another, a teenage girl's imprisoned and forced to choose the way in which she is gonna die, with options ranging from boiling alive to electrocution to decapitation. She chooses the decap attack. Dear FNAF tubers, I know we were all super worried about Kappa coming in and striking us down, but when we're covering stories like these, I think we're pretty darn safe. But of course, I wouldn't be talking about all this on Game Theory if it wasn't for the lore. These aren't just random horror stories. Each one is connected back to characters and locations that we know from the original games. The girl who makes a wish to be beautiful and then is unknowingly hacked to pieces? Well, the fairy godmother doing the hacking is a red pigtailed clown robot with green eyes. Does that description sound familiar to anyone? What about the girl who opts for decapitation? Well, I mentioned that she's in prison. What I left out was that she's actually trapped in the stomach of a white and pink bear with a twisted sense of humor and a thirst for blood. And if all that's too subtle for you, well, the first story outright has a guy in a golden bunny suit taking us to see 6 murdered kids in the back of a Freddy's Pizzeria in the year 1985. Pretty darn direct, but more on that later. These stories matter because they're giving us more information about how the FNAF universe operates, sometimes in very direct ways, like giving us the exact number of murder victims and the dates of their death, and sometimes in more indirect ways, by showing us that this is a canon where a girl can be rebuilt day by day, piece by piece as a human-robot hybrid so realistic that no one, not even herself, realizes it. And so that is what we're covering today, what these stories show us about the FNAF universe, what they confirm, and also what important new details they unlock. Plus, they open up a big theory about the games, one that I actually got wrong late last year, and I'm very excited about now. So with all that said, reader beware, you're in for a scare. Oh, and for those of you who've dismissed the stories as non-canon, I wouldn't be too quick to judge these books. Each one of them has this in its official description. Quote, in this volume, horror master Scott Cawthon spins 3 sinister novella-length stories from different corners of his series' canon, end quote. Different corners of canon, you say? Sounds to me like some stories are going to be more aligned with the trilogy of books, some more so with the canon of games, but still, all of them existing within the canon itself. So absolutely worth our time to investigate. The first story actually has a lot to cover, so I'm going to just save that one for last and instead start with the second, To Be Beautiful. In it, Sarah, a 14-year-old girl, rescues a red pigtailed clown animatronic from the trunk of a car that she finds in a scrapyard. Grateful to be saved, the robot, who calls herself Eleanor, but is probably better described as Giraffe Baby based on the cut illustrations from the book, says that she'll grant any wish. Sarah wishes to be beautiful, and Baby, like a twist,
Yes, I am excited for the FNAF movie.
By putting Sarah to sleep every night and hacking off sections of her body while she's unconscious, replacing them with robotic junk. Quote, Sarah looked to the floor, a bag contained a human leg, another human arm. Blood pooled in the bottoms of the bags, but the limbs had been severed neatly, as if in a surgical amputation. Another bag stuffed with bloody snake-like entrails of what appeared to be a liver slid from the cabinet's shelf and landed on the floor with a wet splat. Hey, if pizzerias never work out for you, baby, Beverly Hills Plastic Surgeon is a great backup career. The only stipulation is that Sarah must wear a special necklace to keep the illusion alive. When the necklace inevitably falls off, Sarah's new junk body is exposed and falls apart. She dies, surrounded by her own severed body parts as she's forced to watch Baby walk out to the world having stolen her old look and identity. Quote again, "It made your wish come true, Sarah. And in return," Eleanor laughed again. She jerked and shook, her silver finish turning the pinkish shade of Caucasian skin. In a matter of moments, she was a dead ringer for Sarah. Well, you certainly made my wishes come true. Great story to read to the kids at night, by the way. Good night, sleep tight, don't let the shape-shifting robot slice off your face and steal it. Anyway, as I mentioned before, Sarah's extreme makeover confirms that in the FNAF canon, humans can be partly or fully robotic without ever knowing it. We've seen it before in the original trilogy of books, where the fourth closet revealed that protagonist Charlie was a highly advanced robot, and we're seeing it again happen here. A normal human Sarah unknowingly being remade into a robot. The fact that this is now a recurring element of the series goes to support the idea that Michael, the crying child of FNAF 4, after getting bitten, could have been put back together in a much more literal way than any of us were expecting all those years ago. He was put together as a machine. He grew up without knowing it and was only able to figure it all out once he miraculously survived being scooped at the end of Sister Location.
Something is wrong with me. I should be dead, but I'm not.
Does this little short story outright confirm any of it? No, certainly not, but third time is a charm, Michael. The third story about a girl named Millie trapped inside Funtime Freddy's stomach doesn't really tell us a whole lot, but instead it just confirms what we already suspected, that the Funtime robots were designed to be large enough to capture kids and either kill them off or transport them to underground testing facilities. Moving on to the end of the book, there's a little teaser, like a Marvel movie but with 100% less Nick Fury, where we get a preview of a seemingly new monster. 2 cops are discussing a hooded figure raiding the neighborhood's dumpsters. They call it the Stitch Wraith. Quote, "The Stitch Wraith," witnesses said, was a shrouded figure in some sort of cloak. The detective squinted at a picture that showed the figure pulling what seemed to be a mannequin's torso from the dumpster. The face wasn't a face, not a human face anyway. It looked more like a mask. The face was round, and its features were drawn onto the curved white surface. It had dark eyes, one of which looked blackened, with those blood stains around the mouth. And To me, the Stitch Wraith is just a cooler name for Ennard. I mean, you got yourself a creature that has a white mask with a missing blacked out eye, sharp, potentially bloody teeth, and a lurching walk. Definitely similar to the way that he's shown in the games. Ennard's obsession with trash would also be appropriate for the Stitch Wraith. I mean, it's just a mass of wires. It needs something like a mannequin torso to give it form. We actually see the same thing with Scrap Baby's design from FNAF 6. Between games, she clearly assimilated any and all garbage into her form to be more passable and human. To me, I gotta be honest, I just think the Stitch Wraith story is cool because it shows the outside world's reaction to the Freddy creatures that we all know. It starts to show what happened to him after the events of the game. It connects the dots for the story after the credits finished rolling. To know that Ennard, after he escapes from Sister Location, to the in-universe people going about their daily lives is just this urban legend named the Stitch Wraith, I guess that's just pretty interesting to me. I think it's fun. Anyway, it's also worth noting here that the teaser attributes 5 dead bodies to Ennard. Quote, five withered bodies with eyes that bled black down the sides of the face, end quote. So it appears that Ennard, after leaving Michael's body, tried to skin suit 5 or so other people. Notice that it says withered bodies. These are bodies that have clearly decayed, just like we saw with Michael's at the end of Sister Location. And the mode of death, them crying black. It's just the body leaking oil as Ennard needs to go and find another skin suit to possess. So that's pretty much everything else. But what I really want to focus on now and in a follow-up mini-theory is the first story of this bunch. The story where the book gets its name, Into the Pit. In it, a video game-loving, anime-obsessed 10-year-old boy named Oswald is forced to spend most of his summer in an old, run-down restaurant named Jeff's Pizza. One day, wanting to pull a prank on his father, he finds himself in a, wait for this, time-traveling ball pit that takes him to 1985, the day where 6 murders had just happened at Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria. Quote, when the smell of pizza hit Oswald's nose, he understood. He was still in Jeff's Pizza, or more accurately, what Jeff's Pizza had been before Jeff took over. The ball pit was new and not roped off. On the wall was a mural of the same characters performing on stage, the brown bear, the blue rabbit, and the bird girl. Below their faces were the words Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. He even caught sight of a calendar hanging in an open office that helped him pinpoint the date, 1985. End quote. Way to take the mystery out of it there, guys. I was all ready to cross-reference all the arcade cabinets that you saw in the pizzeria and the allusions to the Smurfs and other popular media at the time to find the date, but you just had to go and take that all away from me. Thanks for saving me the research, I guess, but no thanks for taking away my deserving YouTube watch minutes. And here's the first big mind blow of this book series. First, because I think there are actually 2 in this one story. In this story, we get ourselves clear, indisputable evidence that in 1985, 6 kids were killed. Quote, the rabbit stopped in front of a door with a sign reading party room.
That looks so weird.
Than Oswald, their lifeless bodies propped into sitting positions, their legs stretched out in front of them. They were all wearing Freddy Fazbear birthday parties. Oswald couldn't tell how they died, but he knew the rabbit was responsible for it. That the rabbit had wanted him to see his handiwork. And on one hand, it's incredible to finally get ourselves a date and a firm number of dead children. But get ready to change your Facebook status because it is complicated. You see, 1985 has never once been an important date in the series. 1983? Absolutely, that's FNAF 4. 1987? You betcha, that's FNAF 2. We've got ourselves 80s representation everywhere. Mullets and Oingo Boingo for days, but never, not once, has there ever been a mention of 1985. And while it might be easy to immediately write that off as a typo or some non-canon event, it's definitely not. Far from it. In fact, for as wacko as it seems, this time-traveling ball pit from a short story and a spin-off series of books takes Oswald back to a pizzeria that we've never seen before, but one that we have absolutely known to have existed since the second game in this series. As proof, let me pull up a clip from my second ever episode on FNAF, back when Purple Guy was actually Phone Guy. Those were the days. Every Way to Sunday, this game is a prequel. Posters everywhere in Five Nights 2 welcome you to this new location, implying that there was another Freddy Fazbear's Pizza somewhere before this one. Additionally, the Phone Guy makes reference to it on night 1, mentioning the old location and how it was left to rot. So let me recap. There's the restaurant from the first game, which is the last in the timeline. The one that you're currently working at in 1987 in Five Nights 2, an older location of Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria left to rot, and the original Fredbear's Diner. In FNAF 2, we're presented with newspaper clippings that outright says that this location is having a grand reopening. But we knew, even way back then, 5 years ago, that the events of FNAF 1 took place after FNAF 2. It was a prequel sequel, so there had to have been a Freddy Fazbear's Pizza that existed prior to FNAF 2 that got the franchise shut down in the first place. We also know that it wasn't Fredbear's Family Diner because Phone Guy calls that restaurant out separately.
Hello and welcome to your new summer job at the new and improved Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We're going to try to contact the original restaurant owner. I think the name of the place was Fredbear's Family Diner or something like that.
So in this one random little scene,
I like FNAF 2 a lot.
A pivotal piece of the
I think it's my favorite FNAF game.
A mystery pizzeria that's been gone since the very beginning of this franchise. A pizzeria that looks to be home to the first 6 actual murders of the Fazbear story. In fact, I can actually do you one better. I believe this to be the 6 dead kids that we end up reuniting in the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3. Notice that detail about all of them wearing party hats. These were kids all taken from the same party. And the Happiest Day minigame from FNAF 3 has us reuniting them to finally finish the birthday party that got prematurely and gruesomely cut short. This is huge information here, guys. However, true to form, as it always is with this story, not everything lines up. With this being chronologically the earliest set of murders that we see at a pizzeria set before 1987, then we should be seeing the animatronics get possessed here. It's something that we've never actually seen in the games. This should be the missing children's incident, where the victims' bodies are shoved into the suits, never to be found. But it's clearly not. The book makes it very obvious that these bodies were clearly out and visible. Quote again, there were noises, but not the usual ones of Fred Fazbear's. Screams, crying children, yells for help, chaos. Oswald's stomach in knots, he moved through the crowd, past crying mothers running with their toddlers in their arms, past dads grasping children's hands and leading them swiftly towards the exit, their faces masks of shock. And the bunny laid out all his victims for everyone to see. Far cry from the bodies being shoved into the suits and then not being discovered for years on end. Hence, the missing children's incident. And we know that the missing children's incident is most likely where the animatronics got possessed because, you know, their bodies are in the suits, along with the metal. And so the metal and the souls fuse together to create living animatronics. Roll into FNAF 2 1987. Oh my gosh, look, there's living animatronics roaming around this pizzeria. Oh, and we installed security devices just because we know a murderer came around the last time. There's a reason I stopped talking about the timeline of these things. Additionally, there are 6 children dead. The missing children's incident only had itself 5. That, in and of itself, would be okay, right? Since FNAF 6, 6 children has always been the magic number. It's weird to mention a magic number when talking about murdered children, but you know what? This series desensitizes you to a lot. Our list is Susie, Fritz, Gabriel, Jeremy, Cassidy, and Charlotte. The core 4 animatronics, Golden Freddy, and the puppet, 6. The problem is, Charlotte the puppet always seems to have a separate death outside of the building, outside of the realm of the other 5 children. So having her suddenly lined up with all the rest of the kids at the same time just doesn't make a whole heck of a lot of sense. I don't know, maybe I just need to think on it more because everything else lines up. We have ourselves a golden bunny leading kids down a hallway into a back room, just like those original newspaper clippings describe. He's also very clearly visible, which means he'd likely be taken into custody. Again, just like those original newspaper clippings describe. As it always is with the series, so many items line up. There's just 1 or 2 little details, little sticking points that make the pieces fit a little awkwardly. I honestly think, though, that this isn't the last time that we're going to be seeing this pizzeria. Remember earlier when I mentioned that new FNAF game that's coming out in 2020, a little bit later this year, probably titled Into Madness? Well, that one is set all the very 80s theme. Again, we've been talking about the Rockstar animatronics for a couple episodes now, and that's the one where they get revealed. It wouldn't be surprising to me to see that the one where we finally step foot inside the first ever Freddy Fazbear's Pizzeria and witness all the events that Oswald just saw for ourselves. So there you have it, my friends. The first major and a couple of minor reveals that this installment had in store for us. However, there is one final mystery that this story might help us solve. Not only does it give us a new set of murders to think about, crimes that are now chronologically the earliest that we see in the timeline, but also Into the Pit may just be giving us the identity of the person behind all of this. I don't mean behind the child murders. I mean the mystery of the man behind the games. What do I mean by that? And what evidence do I have to prove it? Well, that, my friends, is a theory unto itself for next week. So in the meantime, subscribe, ring the bell, and most importantly, remember, it's all just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for sticking around to the end. I know these FNAF episodes tend to dive pretty deep sometimes, but...
What are you talking about? behind the game. That's, yeah. I don't know.
Oh, what is this?
My T-Mobile home internet split.
You too. To hear you need to bench that spotty service and...
Oh no, hand jump scare.
Hello, Internet. Welcome
To game theory.
where today we continue our analysis of FNAF's newly released ghost stories, The Fazbear Frights. Last week we covered the majority of this book's key reveals, including the massive bombshell where we visit what is chronologically the earliest Freddy Fazbear's Pizza we've yet seen, a location that we have never visited before in any of this series canon, but one that we know to have existed somewhere in the background since the release of FNAF 2. With 6 murders set in 1985, it makes it very likely that this was the mystery location to have closed down the franchise before its grand reopening 2 years later in 1987. And that, loyal theorists, is why I scrounged through every scrap of FNAF content out there. I'm like entered the Stitch Rain over here. Scott throws out ideas and I'm just digging through his dumpster hoping to cobble it all together into a workable body theory thing. Whatever. As that silly children's workbook taught me years ago, some of the biggest lore reveals in this franchise can happen in the unlikeliest of places. Yeah, we're gonna reveal Golden Freddy's name in this children's workbook word search. Fantastic. Actually, it was fantastic. I thought it was a brilliant way to do it. That said, I will not forgive Dabby.
She's back.
Cursed image. But you see, I think there was one other massive lore reveal hidden in Fazbear Frights, buried amongst the tales of Extreme Makeover Robot Edition and Ball Pit Time Machine. A lore reveal that is absolutely worth our time exploring today. A lore reveal that introduces us to a character who's been helping to pull the strings since the very beginning. One who's been misleading us about the horrors of Fazbear Entertainment. Someone whose importance goes far beyond just the 40 pages he appears in throughout this book. I think Into the Pit may have just introduced us to the creator of these games. And I'm not talking about Scott Cawthon. Let me explain. One of the strangest inclusions in FNAF VR Help Wanted was a reference to a game designer that was telling lies about the horrors happening in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza.
We know that Fazbear Entertainment has developed something of a bad reputation over the last few decades, and while it's true that some stories associated with our name were loosely based on actual events, the majority of them were total fabrications from the mind of a complete lunatic. Lawsuits pending.
And yes, that sweet, sweet piece of man candy that you see there is Scott Cawthon himself. Okay, fine, funny joke there, Scott. I mean, this series likes to get self-aware. We're all familiar with that. And for a mainline title in the series, this one felt pretty extreme, but fine, cool with it. And then you keep playing the game, and what started as a one-off tongue-in-cheek joke actually becomes a critical piece of the lore.
They lied to us. They lied to all of us. They told us that the whole point of this VR game was to undo the bad PR done by a rogue indie game developer who supposedly made up a bunch of crazy stories that tarnished the brand.
But it doesn't stop there. There's more twists in FNAF VR than there is in a typical M. Night Shyamalan movie.
Fazbear Entertainment hired the game developer. Those indie games were designed to conceal and make light of what happened. This isn't just an attempt to rebrand. It's an elaborate cover-up.
The whole thing starts with like, oh, this game designer is a joke. Psych! No, he's not. He's actually critical to the lore and is exposing the crimes happening at these restaurants. Booyah! Fooled you again. He's actually one of the villains. When the dust actually settles on this plot development, what we're left with is a game designer looking like Scott Cawthon, hired by Fazbear Entertainment to make indie games. The games that we've all been playing up to this point in order to misdirect us away from the real lore of the story. So of course, I did an episode all about how Scott Cawthon is the villain of FNAF. Let me rephrase what we just heard. Scott is one of the bad guys. He was lying to us. If FNAF VR's tapes are to be believed, pretty much everything we know from the first 3, at least, but maybe even 4, 5, heck 6 games could all be thrown out as complete complete fabrications created by Scott Cawthon for the sole reason because he was paid off by Fazbear Entertainment. Except I was wrong. Nothing new to be sure, but here, my timing couldn't have been any worse. You see, earlier that very week that I uploaded that video, Scott made a post on Reddit saying that the indie game developer from FNAF VR isn't him. Here's what he had to say. Quote, "The question is this, is Scott Cawthon now a part of FNAF? The short answer is no. Yes, I use my own picture for this indie developer because it's an obvious parallel, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's actually me in universe." And yeah, Scott, you remain vague and mysterious about the lore for years, half a decade at this point, and this one little detail is the thing that you want to clarify, and you just choose to do it right before my video on this very topic, which, while it is honestly still a perfectly valid theory, gets everyone to dismiss all of the findings for that entire theory since it's the one small detail that I get wrong and everyone focuses on. I don't have feelings about any of that at all. Scott continues, quote again. So no, I'm not canon. Only the existence of a game developer that supposedly made video games based on actual events that may or may not be a cover-up by Fazbear Entertainment is canon. Keep in mind that I do tend to use pictures of me and my family in the games, just because they're so readily available. In FNAF 4, I used a picture of a mountain range that I took while I was a truck driver in West Texas. I used a picture of a snowman that me and my older sons made together. I used a picture of a pet mockingbird that we nursed back to health one year. Do these have lore significance? Well, you probably already know the answer, and I know the answer, Scott. And that answer is yes. You breathe and it becomes canon. My ever-decreasing sanity aside, it does leave open the door as to the identity of who this rogue indie developer is. And I think that Fazbear Frights' story Into the Pit reveals to us who it might actually be. Admittedly, this is a bit looser of a theory, but I think it's one worth discussing. I believe our secret game designer, the one who's been lying to us through these games, is the story's
Oswald.
main character, Oswald. The little tin
Wow,
man
I'm so smart.
ends up in a time-traveling ball pit to visit the 1985 murder scene of Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. I believe he grows up to be hired on by Fazbear Entertainment to create these games. Now, that might seem like a stretch for a character that we only get to know in the span of 40 pages, but holy Melora! Is there a lot of evidence in those 40 pages to back that assertion up? Shortly into his story, Oswald is shown to be obsessed with animatronics for no apparent reason. Quote from the book, he didn't know why, but lately he'd been drawing mechanical animals, bears, bunnies, and birds. He imagined them being human-sized, moving with the jerkiness of robots in an old science fiction movie. Sometimes he drew the animals' exposed metal skeletons or sketched them with the fur peeling. It was a creepy effect, like seeing a person's skull peeking out from beneath the skin. And now mind you, this is without him ever having a connection to animatronics. Heck, he doesn't have a connection to the pizzeria at this point in the story. He has never been there. Nothing. This is just him naturally choosing to draw these oddly specific things without any outside references or influences. So already this boy seems to have himself a strange connection to the FNAF lore, or is just a psychopath in training, but there's more. For such a short story, Into the Pit takes a lot of time to establish Oswald as a fan of video games, B-grade Japanese movies, and manga. A lot of time for a 40-page story. We hear about him listening to video game soundtracks. We witness the debates that he has with his father over cheesy Toho-style Godzilla monsters, how funny he finds the actors' lips not matching up with the dubbed-in words in those sorts of movies. He visits the library and we hear about his enthusiasm for the latest manga installment. Now, the connection to video games is pretty obvious here, right? If he likes video games, well, there's a chance that he'd want to grow up to be a designer of video games himself. But it's his connection to old, cheesy Japanese films and manga that really got my gears turning. Think back to Ultimate Custom Night. At various point thresholds in that game, you would unlock the Bear of Vengeance cutscenes, each one clearly inspired by those old, poorly dubbed Japanese samurai movies, the art style clearly riffing on classic anime and manga animations. The mysterious designer of the FNAF games, who presumably made Ultimate Custom Night, would need to be a fan of this style of storytelling to want to incorporate it into his work. And here we have ourselves Oswald, a person who exists in this universe, whose limited characterization is spent establishing him as a fan of exactly this type of storytelling. Speaking of limited characterization, it's a minor connection, but a key point of the story is how money-strapped Ozzy and his family are. The reason he spends so much of his time in the library and the pizzeria is that they're both cheap forms of entertainment during the day, while his family works over the summer. If Oswald were to grow up and end up designing the FNAF games, well, actually be a somewhat similar story arc to Scott Cawthon himself. As his story goes, Scott was a struggling game designer. He was making minimum wage during the day as a Dollar General store clerk and working on his games at night, with none of them going anywhere, many of them being poorly received. The first Freddy's game was the one where all of his years of hard work and grinding finally paid off. There's obviously a lot more to that story, but suffice it to say, Oswald seems to be a character after Scott's own heart, coming from modest means, a fan of nerd culture. So to see Ozzy be the in-universe programmer of these games, to be Scott's literal in-universe stand-in for himself, well, it doesn't seem like that much of a stretch. But okay, saying our designer was this kid who draws spooky animatronics, comes from a low to modest income family, has a story similar to Scott, and likes the video games and anime is still a bit of a stretch, right? Describes like 90% of kids. Okay, well, maybe not all kids have a psychic connection with a decades-old murder restaurant, but the rest of it, sure, pretty generic kid. Here's the thing though, we're not just talking about Oswald's character traits here. If you look at Ozzy's experience with the Fazbear restaurant in the story, you could see where he'd be inspired to include certain game elements that we ourselves played. The first and most obvious is Jeff, the current owner of Jeff's Pizzeria, the pizzeria that took over the abandoned Freddy Fazbear's in Oswald's time. He's described in the book like this, quote, Jeff was creepy too. He looked 100 years old, but was probably just 30, with those heavy-lidded, bloodshot eyes, the stained apron, and the slow speech and movement. He was like a zombie pizza chef. And slow movements, bloodshot eyes, zombie pizza chef with a red-stained apron. It sounds like it could very well be the inspiration behind an undead murderer in a pizzeria who refuses to die, or a walking purple zombie that haunts the streets of the town. Remember, the game designer hired on by Fazbear Entertainment was tasked to lie about and make light of the murders in the Freddy restaurants. So what we see in the games would likely be a mix of reality and fiction. Oswald could very well be pulling from his real-life experiences. I mean, the names of people Oswald encounters also have themselves an uncanny similarity to what we see in the games. Ozzy's best friend from the past is named Mike, a Mike who outright says this, quote, you know, when I was little, I loved Freddy Fazbear's band. I even had a stuffed Freddy I used to sleep with, end quote. Wee-woo, wee-woo, wee-woo. Oh, sorry, that's the Lord Connection alarm. It goes off anytime someone makes a passing reference to FNAF 4. In that same conversation, Mike also reveals that he has himself a sister. Wee-woo, wee-woo, wee-woo. Sorry again. And then they also talk about how creepy clowns and dolls are. Woo, 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 woo. Apologies, that's my other alarm. That's the sister location revelation alarm. Anyway, it doesn't seem to be Mike Afton or Mike Emily. Oh, you can bet I checked into that one. But these conversations could certainly have inspired Oswald to make a character named Mike, who lives and loves the Freddy Fazbear franchise, who has himself a favorite Freddy plush, who has a sister who loves dolls and becomes a really creepy clown doll hybrid who commands an army of dolls herself. Later in the book, Oswald meets a girl named Gabrielle, who loves Greek myth and gives him the courage to fight back against Golden Bonnie. Gabrielle is a very random character, but one with, again, a very important name. One that is, once again, shockingly similar to one of the kids that we find on our gravestone, Gabriel. Even the theme of this short story could have inspired Oswald's games. You see, after Oswald uncovers the 1985 murders, his dad gets sucked into the time travel pit by Golden Bonnie. And not just sucked in, he's replaced. Suddenly, everywhere his dad should be, Ozzy instead sees the silent, staring Golden Bonnie stalking him, watching him. Ozzy is the only one who sees it too. Everyone else just sees his father like normal. Actually a really creepy, disturbing piece of imagery. One that gets Ozzy to question his own sanity. But it's also one that directly ties back to the core motif of the games. A father, William Afton, becoming a golden bunny to terrorize kids, including his own son. A son who then has to go out, seek, and ultimately rescue his father in order to end the nightmare. And then you just have random lines inserted into the story that kind of fit, but kind of don't, but are also oddly specific to key moments throughout the FNAF franchise, like this, quote, every day you toss me out on the street like garbage, end quote, which are reminiscent of the FNAF 6 salvage minigames, with animatronics literally being thrown out on the street. This line, as Ozzy says it in the context of the scene, is kind of awkward, but if you're looking at it through the lens of, hey, this is actually a lore connection back to the games, now all of a sudden, it fits perfectly. There are just so many details that line up between Oswald's character, the people he meets, and the things stages that he goes through that line up with someone who could have made the FNAF games, who could have concocted parts and pieces of this story. Even motive-wise, it makes sense. Maybe Fazbear hires him on because they know he knows the truth, and it's to get him to shut up. Maybe Ozzy accepts the money because A, he's poor, and B, he's scared. He knows what they can do to him. I mean, will any of this ever come into play in any way, shape, or form? Unclear, probably not. But, one, it actually may be able to help us better separate out the truth from the fiction in the early games of this franchise. Like knowing zombie people were inspired by Jeff, the owner of Jeff's Pizzeria, the zombie guy, may take all of that information off the table and really let us focus in on what truly matters, a specific subset of murders. But even if it doesn't do anything grandiose like that, too, I wouldn't be surprised if we end up seeing Oswald again at some point. I mean, already there's a new teaser for the next installment of Fazbear Fright, Fetch, up on Scott's website. So you can bet that we're going to have a lot more to say about this series and its connections with the games in the coming months. But hey, that's just a theory. A game theory. Thanks for watching.
You remember that one time where MatPat was obsessed over the fact that, the main games were actually, like, video games? Yeah. Oh, look! If I had what should I write in the comments so that we can make 20,000 comments? Someone give me something to write.
What if you could do SEO smarter and faster? With Wix, you can edit your meta.
Game series. Book series. Now wanted. New book series. Oh, come on. Fine. Phone guy. Phone dude. Purple guy. Orange dude. Didn't you just... Fine. Wild card. Change the category. Timeline. Bite of 87. Chomp of 83. Party of 85. Wait, but... Time traveling ball pit. You can't just... Reverse. Oh, yeah? Reverse. 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 Reverse, 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 reverse. Hello, Internet. Welcome to Game Theory. Another day, another installment in the FNAF multimedia conglomerate. So, at this point, some people in the FNAF community really hate my guts. Like, ring me through a meat grinder and feed me to a rabid dog animatronic levels of hate. Like, for instance, this comment, and I'll read it exactly as written to stay true to his authorial intent. Quote, as a hard-care FNAF fan, he's an embracement to FNAF tourists. He insists on using the box to proof his stupid theories, and they don't even make sense. He sooks and thinks he's smart, but he's not. I wish he would stoop. He then goes on to rant for a paragraph about how unrealistic time travel is in a franchise about robot rabbits haunted by ghost metal, but I think you get the point. And though I use this one really over-the-top extreme comment as an example, seeing stuff like this is a bummer, because I don't know if you can tell, but I really do like this franchise, and I see my role in it as a person just connecting ideas or presenting new threads to consider in a franchise that at this point is massive and really, really confusing. But his comment does bring up something that I should probably address at the top of this episode since it'll be relevant for today. My use of the, how did he put it? The box to proof my theories. Here's the thing, friends. I think this is something that both sides could use as a reminder. Both my FNAF Theory followers and my FNAF Theory haters. There is a difference between canonicity and continuity. And I think a lot of the times in these sorts of discussions, they get confused with each other. Something being listed as canon just means that it's official. It is blessed by the person who is overseeing the rules of the universe. It is self-consistent within the boundaries of that fictional world. On the other hand, a continuity, at least as I'm referring to it here, is a timeline of events. A continuous story thread where one event leads to the next that leads to the next. Take Star Wars as an example. Rey having magic healing powers in Rise of Skywalker, or Leia flying around like Mary Poppins in The Last Jedi. Because they're appearing in official works of the franchise, those powers thereby get the green light as being canonical powers of the Force in the overall Star Wars universe. course. The problems people have with them, though, is that they don't fit in cleanly with the continuity that was previously established. If forced healing is in fact a thing, then why hasn't it been used to save literally anyone before this point in the series? Tell you what, it would have been really handy for old Qui-Gon Jinn over there in episode 1, but the fact remains, healing is now a canonical force power, which means that the canonicity of certain powers is presenting challenges to the established continuity of events that came before. Now, this is where FNAF comes in. You see, you can have multiple continuities all existing under the same canon, and it appears as though this is how the FNAF franchise is working. The original novels and the original games exist in an alternate universe from one another. They are separate continuities, and yet they are all deemed canon. This was all expressly stated by Scott years ago. Quote, "So yes, the book is canon, just as the games are. That doesn't mean that they are intended to fit together like two puzzle pieces. The book is a reimagining of the Five Nights at Freddy's story, and if you go into it with that mindset, I think you'll really enjoy it." End quote. Now, what I've been trying to do with my theories, and what I think some people on both sides misunderstand, is that I'm not trying to use the books to solve a continuity. I'm trying to use the books to establish a canon that will then allow us to solve a continuity. The books present us with themes, concepts, characters, and motivations in one continuity that can then inform our understanding of a separate continuity, or at the very least give us questions that we can ask of that continuity. Charlie being a robot in the books tells us that in the canon of the Five Nights world, passable humanoid robots can actually be a thing. So are there any characters in the games who this may or may not apply to? I don't know, but it's a question that we owe it to ourselves to ask because it's been established to be canon within this franchise. Do we know what these little pins are on Baby's design here in the game? No idea. In fact, most people probably didn't even remember that they existed in the first place. But in the books, they play an important role. These are the things that allow Baby to transform into a human disguise. Now, is that necessarily what they're doing in the game? No, definitely not. Is the best and likely only clue for what they really are coming from a separate continuity? Yeah, in this case, yes it is. This isn't us trying to shove puzzle pieces together like Scott warned us against. It's about seeing that in one puzzle, there's a piece that fits in a certain location, and in a separate puzzle, you have a similar piece that might end up acting in a similar way. And here's the thing, you don't have to take my word on any of this anymore. Scott recently made a new post about all of this to clarify the situation. In response to the question of whether the lore of FNAF is solvable, he said this: "All I can do is say that some questions will be answered, even if it may not always be the answer you wanted. Be patient." Let me at least say this: future games will look forward, but look to the novels to fill in some of the blanks to the past. So there you have it, from the creator himself. Does including the books in our discussions make things messy and complicated? Sure, but remember what franchise we're talking about here, friends. Messy and complicated is like the formal first name that...
I have to go, so I'm just gonna cut it right here, and I'm just gonna call this like a half of a live stream, and then